Hey there, Squirrel Army. Yeah, how's it going? Today we are going to be discussing getting invited back to games.
You can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing.
Alrighty, so we're discussing getting invited back to play games with people because that's something that I think comes up a bit even now. Like, I think people are a bit more aware and a bit more kind of, you know, I don't know, like they're a bit more accepting of the fact that, hey, like it is a real thing that, yes, I could play online or whatever, but that's not that much fun and whatnot. We all remember playing games through COVID and whatnot. I don't play very much online anymore. Every now and again, maybe once in a blue moon, but you know, uh, I don't really do it, and I don't think a lot of people do it either. I think some people who play like modern and standard and that sort of stuff do. I know some people play, you know, Commander and that, but not very much. Certainly, I think that the enjoyment of Commander is playing with a group of people in person. So that's one of those things, and this is just a thing that happens, not just in Commander, but in any game that you're kind of playing with friends or with acquaintances. Like, if you're a bad salt when you go to play Catan or whatever else, that people are playing, Frosthaven, Gloomhaven, King's Dilemma, any of this Clank, whatever else that you've got out there, it doesn't really matter what we're talking about. You've got to be a good sport. And sometimes it can be a bit tough. Sometimes you have a bad game or whatever and that sort of thing. And sometimes people, sort of not so much that they bring a deck that's too good, but sometimes they don't realize how good it kind of is. So they really haven't really kind of gauged the table or gauged how good the deck is or gauged how oppressive or whatever their deck can kind of be. So sometimes you and sometimes again, like, you might want that experience where, okay, we're gonna all play our most powerful or high end decks or whatever, or we're all gonna play a CDH deck. Like, I wouldn't do that, but still, like, okay, I'm going to whip out my most powerful deck, whichever one that is. I don't know which one it is, but again, it's one of those things. Okay, cool. We're all going to play our most powerful and broken decks and see what happens. And that can be fun. Some people say a fast game's a good game, and in a sense, yes, it is. You don't want to just drag the game along for no real reason. But if you're having a problem, or if you're just like, oh, if somebody says, oh, like, why did your turn take 10 minutes, or why did your turn take 5 minutes, or whatever, like, or somebody asks whose turn it is, and you say, oh, it's my turn, and they're like, well, hurry up then, or whatever. And I'm like, dude, it's not that easy. I've got a problem over here. I'm stuck on 2 mana or whatever, and I've been stuck on 2 mana for the last couple of turns, so I'm trying to figure out what I should discard, or whether I should play out this card or something else, and that sort of thing. So yeah, like, it's one of those things. You're not just sitting there going, yes, bananas or whatever. You're trying to go, now, how can I get myself out of this sticky wicket sometimes? Or, Matt just played a really scary creature. Should I try to deal with his really scary creature, or should I be like, you know what? I actually, again, like, I'm sitting here with no lands, basically, except for the 2 lands that I've already played. That's it, or whatever, or the 3 lands that I've already played, and that's it. So I think I need more lands. So I need to either draw them or I need to tutor for them. So that might be my problem. I might be sitting there with no lands again. Or I might be sitting there with all the lands. Again, like that's almost always one of my two problems. I'm sitting there with either all the lands in the world and nothing to do with them, or absolutely no lands, and I have no way to cast all the spells that I've got in my hand. So I'm just going, okay, or I'm going, cool, and, Dave just played another freaking, 10-10 Eldrazi or whatever. Yep, and I've got to deal with that at some point, but I've really got to get my third or fourth land here, guys, or whatever, or I've actually got to get actual gas rather than just lands, that happens a lot to me, but I know that also happens to a lot of other people too, but again, you just have bad games. Sometimes I have a lot of those, but whatever. Sometimes you slap yourself in the head and go, why you do this to me, deck, and things like that. But again, that is part of the game. But one of the parts of the game that we do tend to get right when we're building our decks is making sure we're thinking, before I said being intentional. You want to know what you're putting in your deck and why you're putting it in your deck. Well, this is the same sort of thing. You don't want to just... Yes, again, if you want to build one or two decks or whatever that are more powerful, and you say, either at the beginning of the night or at the end of the night or whatever, or maybe even halfway through the night, I don't know, whatever works and whatever people are feeling in the mood for. If some people want to say, oh, I want to get one more game in, I don't want to quite go home yet, and, oh, well, do you guys want to play a really quick, game with, our most powerful decks and just see what happens? Or, if you've got your own sort of semi-play group or your own LGS and, everyone's won one game or something like that, or whatever it is, and then you're going, well, it's the end of the night, and, we've got to tie it up and see who won for the night or whatever it is, because everyone's won one game or whatever, except for me, because I almost never win, but whatever. But still, I have fun in that. I don't, when I'm actually being able to do something, oh my god, what is going on? Finally I'm able to do stuff. Look out! But that's one of those things. Finally, I'm actually in the game and actually doing something. And, not that I'm the threat most of the time still, but sometimes I am, but still, again, my intention for, that deck is not to sit there and do nothing or whatever. It's to actually be doing the thing and to be doing the stuff that my deck wants to do, but just most of the time, for no real apparent reason, I'm very, very, very unlucky, no matter what I do to my decks. Again, like I say, I get either the all lands or I get the almost no lands. And it doesn't matter if I say, okay, cool, I'm going to put 10 more lands in this deck because I've noticed so many of the last games have been, almost no lands. Okay, cool, put those 10 more lands in. Well, I don't know what I'm cutting, but still, if I put those 10 more lands in and I figured out what I was cutting, I can still play a game and still get no basic lands. So, it's that didn't do me anything. I can cut another 10 cards for another 10 lands. And I did that once. I was playing my one of my landfall decks, and I was like, this deck needs a lot of lands because, you want to get landfall triggers all the time. So I was running nearly 45 something lands, I think, or something like that. And even in that deck, I would get hands of literally 0 lands all the time. Or 1 land or 2 lands all the time, and then would never draw another land for the rest of the game. And people were asking me, how many lands are you running? I'm 45 or whatever, even more, and they're like, what? How can you not be getting any lands? I'm I don't know. I'm just not getting them. So, it's like that sometimes. So it's just one of those things. It's not that was the idea. I wasn't oh, haha, guys, I was actually holding all the lands all the time. No, it wasn't. I was holding a whole bunch of spells that I hoped to cast when I finally got my next, one of my lands, but it was way too late by that time. But again, that gets me back to being asked back to play games because, like, hey, like, I'm never really the big threat that much, and it's good fun for the most part. Like, I never have much of a problem in playing with people, or at least I don't think so. Like, I hope that's another thing. Like, I hope people would say, we have a problem with playing with you or whatever or whatnot. Like, or maybe their problem might be like, we don't think you're, playing, for realsies or whatever. And I'll be like, what do you mean? Like, I can show you my hand and literally show you that I have no lands in hand. Or literally show you my hand and literally show you that I have all lands in my hand. And then you tell me that I'm not playing for reals, or I'm not trying, or I'm not... What? What do you want me to do? Like, that's what I mean. And some people will say, well, just, like, tutor for a land. And I'm like, but I don't have a spell to tutor for a land. And they're like, no, we want a real game. And I'm like, this is how real games work, guys. Like, this is how real games happen. Like, real games have people who don't do anything sometimes. Like, no matter what their deck construction is and whatnot. And I even say to people, well, what would I cut if I put in, 5 more lands or whatever? And then, like, I probably still won't do the things. But still, like, it's just one of those things, as I've said. But again, like, there's no problem, like, in my view, of, like, me not being invited back, or people not being like, oh, we don't want to play with you because, wait, why don't we want to play with you? Because you basically never do anything? Well, that doesn't seem like that good of a reason. Like, if you're playing, like, higher level, yeah, certainly, like, you don't want a player that's sort of not really having much fun, and sometimes that can be difficult and things like that. Or maybe sometimes I'm a little bit of a sourpuss about some things, whatever, in the games and things like that. But again, like, with good reason for the most part. But I try to take it in the stride of it as much as what I can, and sometimes it's just the way it is, and sometimes I'm a little bit, like, again, like, if I've blown somebody's mana rock up, or I've done something to somebody, I'm like, well, I might leave them alone. But then I'm like, well, I better at least attack them this turn. I might leave them alone next turn or whatever, and see where we're at and see what's going on. And, sometimes it works out, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes they get me right back by blowing up one of my mana dorks or one of my mana rocks or something else, whatever. So again, like, there's always that to and fro of gameplay that I find that I have. Like, so I never feel like I have problems playing at my LGS. I have problems playing with some people at my LGS. There's people that I've effectively, sort of blacklisted from playing against, but, in my own mental Rolodex. Like, because I'm just like, I cannot be bothered playing with this person because they're literally no fun to play against. Like, like, I just cannot be bothered playing against them no matter what the circumstances is, for the most part, unless, like, they're given a literal jank deck and said, here, play this literal, like, chair tribal deck and have fun, because, like, we're sick of you playing your BS decks that are always way too strong for the rest of us, like, or always too oppressive for the rest of us, or always, like, saying we should run more removal, but then when we actually go ahead and kill your thing, like, once, or one of your things once, or 2 or 3 of your things, then you just like, oh, okay, cool, I'm just going to scoop because I can't do anything. But that's literally what you do to us all the time. You literally kill our stuff and then proceed to play a game of solitaire and then expect people to sort of just sit there and hope that they can fight through it or whatever. So you should always take the beatings back. Like, if you ever have a game, I think, where you just, like, you did all this stuff or you made people feel bad or whatever, you should play a game And when you're getting beat up, you should sit there and just go, okay, cool, I'm getting beaten up this game, so this will make up for me, terrorizing everyone last game or whatever it was, like, not that you should really hold grudges over games, but when, somebody is sort of known for doing this sort of thing almost always or nearly always or a lot of the time, then yeah, like it's like, well, we're not really holding a grudge per se. We're just identifying you as the threat because, like, every single game that we basically play with you is basically the same and you basically always win. So we're just like, no, like if you say, oh, why are you attacking me or whatever, you know why we're attacking you because you did that bullshit last game or you do this bullshit every single game pretty much that you play in with us. So, like we know that you're playing a very powerful set of decks. So we're not going to sit here and hear you say, oh, my decks aren't that powerful. All you guys need to do is run more removal. But then when we run removal or we actually get to cast our removal and cast it on your things, you're like, oh, well, I guess I'll just scoop then. Because now I can't do anything. But you expect other people to sort of sit there and be like, oh, you guys can't do anything. You should run more removal. And things like this. Like, no, not literally like that. But again, like that kind of like perspective and that kind of like attitude of some people is just like, again, not a way that you'll get invited back or, again, not sort of included into playing games with people, more and more, especially, again, with the people that are a bit more casual than what I tend to be. Like, I'm pretty casual for the most part, but again, I do have some more upper pre-con sort of style decks for the most part. So I know a lot of people aren't even on that level. Like, again, but I don't see many people playing anything less than a pre-con for the most part. But sometimes you do, but very rarely. But again, it's just one of those things. I always go into any game or whatever with that mindset of going, well, I'm here not just for my own fun, but I'm here for the other people's fun. I'm here to make this game fun for everyone, or as much as possible, or as interesting as possible. I want people to look at my commander or look at the deck that I'm playing and be like, wow, that's a cool deck. I really think that that's interesting. I might think about building it or whatever, or that's a cool strategy or whatever. Oh, that's a cool synergy. And things like that, or whatever. No, I haven't really ever seen that kind of thing, before or whatnot. Not that you sort of don't see a whole lot of the sort of strategies that I kind of tend to play, not very much. But again, because you do see a lot of those strategies, but just not the way, I guess, that I kind of execute them. I guess because again, I like commanders that do something throughout the whole game, sort of thing, rather than it's just something that's kind of there. I know that's kind of perhaps not as good sometimes because again, you might become too over reliant on your commander. But if it's just there and you can do stuff with it and get value off of it, why not? But again, it's always that problem of being well, I'm too over reliant on it to a degree, but this is the game of Commander, and it's right there. It's that, 8th card in my hand, so it's well, why not? So again, in saying that, you're building your decks to be this is a cool deck. This is a deck that I want people to be that was actually fun to play against. I was, they were actually happy to lose against it or whatever. That's another way to think about it. Build decks that you would be happy to lose against, so that you're just wow, that's actually a really cool deck. I would want to build that because it seems really fun and it wasn't oppressive or, it did some things and stuff and whatnot, but still but it was back and forth. He had one of his answers at the right time. The next game, no, I didn't. So I got crushed there, or I got crushed on that turn, or whatever it was, or I got board wiped, or whatever. But then I rebuilt after that or whatever it was, and then came back with, a flurry and did some stuff and might even have won. Though that does rarely happen. It does happen. Yeah, like, you want people to be like, it's not like we can't deal with you, or we can't, just like, stop what you're doing or whatever else. Like every deck that you play against your opponents, in a sense, is a puzzle for them to have to solve, and they have to provide their own pieces to kind of solve that puzzle of beating your deck. But you don't want to make a deck that's such a puzzle that you basically take away their abilities to, really deal with it too much, because otherwise it just becomes like, this is a deck that's too strong or too difficult to sort of really play in those more casual tables and whatnot. And again, if you have one of those decks, and maybe I have one of those decks, I don't really know, trying to just, limit, saying, okay, well, now I know that this deck isn't that much fun for my opponents, so I really won't play it unless people want to play a more powerful sort of game, or are, willing to, like, sit down for a couple of hours or whatever to really flesh out with this deck, because, again, it's not a deck that really you can sort of just sit there and like, make people play against. Like, at a certain point, either people are going to be, like, angry that you've kind of, like, taken over the game too much or whatnot, and that sort of thing, and then we try to take you down. Like, and sometimes you might want to just let them take you down a little bit, because, and that's why, again, like, I don't run as much protection or whatever, or as many answers, especially in, like, blue decks, perhaps, that I perhaps should, because it's just like, well, I actually want my opponents to actually have a chance sometimes, and not just, like, be completely shutting them out the whole freaking time and being like, haha, like, I get to do all the things and you get to do none of the things, etc. But that also comes back to, like, that idea of, like, threat assessing things, and getting back to letting people play the game, per se, and that sort of thing. Because, again, like, if you, on turn one, maybe destroy someone's Sol Ring or whatever, like, that's probably pretty valid, especially if they've, gone Sol Ring into a Signet or a Talisman or whatever, some other 2-drop mana rock. That's probably fair enough. Like, they've got another mana source there, so, I never have that problem. But again, that's just me. But again, that's one of those things where, like, maybe that's all that person kind of had. Like, all they had was Sol Ring, Signet, or whatever, like, 2-drop mana rock, whatever. And the rest of the hand wasn't that good, like, but they just happened to have Sol Ring into a 2-drop mana rock. So maybe, like, that threat assessment of going, do you have anything to follow that up? Like, oh, no, don't really. Can kind of come into it, but again, it's one of those things, like, it's tough to do that when you're faced with that kind of thing, like, you don't know that that's all kind of somebody has for the most part or whatever, and that sort of thing. So you kind of just have to go off of what's information is on the table, unless you've got, like, something like telepathy or something to see what's in their hand or whatever, those sorts of effects. So, and I'd hate telepathy and those sorts of effects, because they really slow the game down. Because, again, like, somebody can see, oh, you've got a counter spell, and you've got 6 counter spells or whatever it is, or whatnot. So I won't even bother playing any spells this turn, because I know you've got 6 counter spells, or there's no point in me playing this board wipe, because, well, you've got 6 counter spells over there. So, right, cool. And there's no point in me playing any creatures or playing any spells unless I've got something that says, I can't be countered, or you can't, cast spells during my turn, or whatever, that sort of thing. So again, you're just like, like, that kind of thing. But it does really slow the game down in that way. Again, like, it makes the game, like, Is he going to play that counter spell? Maybe, maybe not. Like, that's what I mean by saying, well, like, if I have that counter spell, maybe I will use it. And maybe I won't use it because maybe, again, I'm sitting there and going, you know what? I've been a bit of a big threat throughout this whole game so far. Not that it happens that much, but it has happened a couple of times. And I've had that counter spell or whatever sitting there, and I've been like, you know what? I'll just let them blow my stuff up this time and just be like, okay, what I can do next turn is rebuild from here and do this and do that. Okay, cool. That seems like a good game plan, so I'll just let this board wipe happen. And there have been times where I've been like, you know what? No, this game has been going for literally hours, and it's time to wrap this up, and I'd like to wrap it up if I can. So, this time I am going to counter this thing or whatever, because, this is a really opportune time to, let me close out the game. And I would rather, again, that's why I, save my removal for the most part for game-winning situations and things like that. I don't tend to kill somebody's mana rock on turn 1 or turn 2 or whatever. Yes, it lets them get away with playing that mana rock early and lets them play the game and whatnot, but I'd rather see people play the game, honestly. Like, if somebody has Soul Ring or whatever on the field, then it starts becoming like, well, I hope I can find an answer for that. But, because that's busted, but, still, it's one of those things, like, if I'm sitting there and going, well, is that the thing that I should be worried about? Well, it's going to provide them with value throughout the game, so maybe I won't be the one that actually blows it up because everyone kind of realizes Soul Ring's a big thing that, needs to be removed from the field for the most part once it's on the field. So people do tend to kind of target those down as quickly as what they can. So yeah, like, it's one of those things again, like, so maybe I won't even get the chance to destroy it. Maybe Talon will destroy it, I don't know. Like, maybe Matt will destroy it. I don't know. Like, any number of the other people that I'm playing against could destroy it for me without me having to spend my resources, spend my cards, etc., on removing it. So, like, and again, that's where the group dynamic, I guess, kind of comes into things. And that's where the politics comes into play. I know some people aren't a big fan of the politics, but again, like, when somebody is running away with the game, it's really good to be like, okay, guys, we need to deal with, Steven over here. He's running away with the game, and we really need to slow him down and make sure he just doesn't win the game on us over here. So I've got this card or whatever. I've got a card that can destroy, up to 3, artifacts or enchantments. I'm going to, play it, and I'm going to vote for this. If you guys vote for other permanents or whatever else, then we'll blow up 3 of his things. He might blow up 1 of our things, but, that's at least a fair trade-off for us blowing up 3 of his things and then moving on. Or I've got this Swords to Plowshares, or I've got, some sort of kill spell in my hand. Do you guys have any kill spells in your hand? Like, I will kill this thing if you can kill that thing or this thing or whatever. Like, negotiating with people, being like, let's try to work together a little bit so that, or someone might say, oh, I've actually got a board wipe. And I'm like, okay, cool. Right. Well, given that you've got a board wipe, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just full out attack him because I know either my creatures are just going to die in the combat or they're going to die to the board wipe. So I might as well try to get value out of them here and now. Okay, cool. And I'm not going to play any more creatures or whatever. I'm just going to, play some enchantments or whatever, play an artifact or something or whatever else, and then pass the turn, So, having that little bit of, we are working together, we're working towards the same goal because, hey, they don't want to just lose to, this guy playing his stuff. They want to try to win for themselves. Everyone is, in the end, out for themselves, but they're in the sense of self-preservation, preservating everyone else. Like, again, it's one of those things that you've kind of got to do. You've kind of got to save your opponent sometimes, because, like, if somebody is a huge threat at the table, like, it's one of those things. Like, you're not going to be, like, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to take them down alone for the most part, unless you get really lucky, or unless your deck is built to kind of do that kind of thing, or whatever. So it's just one of those things that you kind of need your other opponents that are kind of not as well off as that guy, but might be eventually. They might be a threat later on down the road, but you don't really care about that in the here and now, because you're like, well, you know, like, in the here and now, I need to deal with this person. You know, we need to deal with this. We need to, you know, combat this together. We all need to know what we're doing. And, like, maybe, like, people will not do that sometimes. Maybe, like, they'll not tell you, oh, I've got a board wipe coming or whatever. And just let you play out your cards or whatever, and just be, like, caught up in the board wipe. But sometimes that's what happens too, like, or whatever. You just kind of like, well, I didn't know that this person was playing a board wipe. So it's just one of those things that, you know, my stuff got caught up in that board wipe. Not that I'm going to hold that too much against them, because that board wipe probably needed to happen. But I was playing my stuff in the thought that, well, it doesn't look like I've got a board wipe, and no one else is really saying anything about, like, removing this stuff or whatever, or board wiping next turn or whatever. So, you know, sometimes that does come back to communication in saying, you know, instead of me playing this stuff, maybe I should ask, hey, has anyone got a board wipe coming or whatever? Because this needs to be dealt with. Like, so it's just one of those things. Like, again, you always want to have your decks being, like, on the same playing field. And again, like, even if your deck isn't, you want to play your deck as if it's on the same playing field as your opponents for the most part. Yes, when a game's been going long and whatnot, then it's sort of time to wrap up, then sure, you can obviously win then, because again, like, you've let those other people, you know, showcase, like, what their deck's about. Let them play their decks, let them do their shenanigans, let them draw their cards, let them, you know, test their deck, let them go, you know what, this card actually isn't that amazing, I would rather have this card or that card or whatever else, because it would be better off for me, or it would do more for me, or whatever. So again, just, like, letting people understand their own deck, because again, like, as I said, take a pinch of salt with any advice. Like, you can, and like when I said, when the coin finally drops, sometimes it takes people playing things or seeing things for themselves to actually, like, fully resonate with, like, the advice that they were given. Like, just giving them flat out advice, or just saying, oh, you're wrong because you're wrong, or whatever, you don't understand, or whatnot. Yeah, that's the problem. They don't understand. So they have to come to the point of understanding, and they only do that by learning throughout the gameplay and whatnot. They don't learn really by you telling them, but just making those suggestions can be useful. But again, it does take that, you know, time and that energy for somebody to kind of come to that, you know what, yeah, that's actually really good advice. Like, running fogs and whatnot is a really good thing to do, because especially in casual games, like, it's one of those things. People are 9 times out of 10 winning by combat damage. So it's like, how many Voltron decks are out there? A lot of them, even though it's one of the worst strategies in my opinion. But again, like, it can win games, and it does win games. So it's one of those things. If people aren't prepared for it, it's going to win the game. And that sort of thing. Again, so it's just one of those things. You've always got to be alert and kind of be balanced in kind of, like, what you're doing and why you're doing it. You're not just trying to wreck somebody's day, but if somebody's playing Cranko or playing a very powerful deck, then it's like, well, you know, what are we meant to do? Like, we either, if we let you play the game with your Krenko deck, you're probably just going to win the game. Like, so, like, there's no, like, opportunity for us to not keep you in track, or under control, because if we ever let you, not out of control, then you're going to win the game. Like, we need to control you, because otherwise, like, our decks won't do anything, because our decks are way slower and take way more time to set up or to do the thing. And that's why, again, like, I actually want to make a video, think a video about this, instead of saying, like, power level or whatever and that kind of thing, because I think we discussed power level, like, before. Instead of saying power level, saying, like, what turn do you expect to win, or to be, like, threatening to win? Like, that is the best way to actually, like, quantify how powerful your deck is. Like, if your deck is going to win on the first couple of turns of the game, then obviously your deck is a very powerful deck. So, like, that definitely belongs at the high-end tables. It doesn't belong at the casual tables, unless people have kind of agreed to, like, face it or whatever or whatnot. I have seen that before, but it's really dumb to do. I think some people might find it fun, but I certainly don't, because I don't like watching people play solitaire or whatnot and that sort of thing either, and I don't think many people do. We all only have so much time in our lives to dedicate to this hobby, and that's what it is at the end of the day. It's a great hobby that we all enjoy, and that's what we want out of it. We just want to play our decks and enjoy the game with some, nice and decent and friendly people that come around. And, if you're fun and friendly and, or a good sport or whatever and that sort of thing, then you'll get invited back to more games and things like that. If you've got a spiky deck and you're just kind of a dick, then, people are going to be like, oh, well, if you're playing a deck that's actually on our power level, or you're actually playing on our, power level, or, in that regard, maybe, but, it starts becoming less and less every single time you kind of ask, or just being like, sorry, but that deck was really strong or whatever, and I didn't really realize, like, is, again, one of those things that you should do anytime. I had a deck that I built, and I didn't realize it was as strong as what it was, but I had built it under several restrictions, and I was like, man, I didn't think that this deck, with all the restrictions that I'd given it, would be this strong, but, it was really strong. So I was just like, sorry, guys, I didn't really realize that it would be that strong, and I even stuck to a really, strict, cap on a lot of the cards that I was playing in that deck. So, but that happens, and again, just, apologizing or whatever, or just being like, I'm sorry about that or whatever, and that sort of thing, and just trying to make people realize, hey, look, I was trying to make this, this deck. I was trying to do this stuff and this was just a 5-color commander, or just this commander that fit the bill and I thought was kind of cool, or I thought I might give it a try or whatever, and, it just didn't work out. So, shit happens sometimes, and that's what people need to realize too. Shit happens, so it's one of those things. But anyway, guys, hope you've enjoyed this one. You can let me know what you think down there in the comments below, and hope you'll join me again in another one.